This is a special presentation of 4 Star Sports Media. Welcome to the 4 Star Sports Media College Football Pick'em Show. Now, live from the BA Mask Studios, here's your host, from the Point, Wes Pruitt.
Are you muted?
Played again. Tonight we got Mike Loveall on from Last Word on Sports College Football. Having technical difficulties tonight, I apologize. Then of course Christian Johnson is on this with, as always, Mike. Welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on tonight.
Wes, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Man, it has been a wild year of college so far. We saw a rash of firings to begin the season, and now it's kind of cooled off a little bit per se. But I want to start the show with a little hot seat talk, and then I'll get to two teams that I find very interesting in the SEC right now for off-the-field things. When it comes to the hot seat, Mike, I'll start with you. Give me a guy or two that may begin getting a little warm.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about coaches on the hot seat, I think the conversation, and now that we've cleared out a couple coaches in the early season, starts with Brian Harrison there at Auburn. I'm a firm believer that you got to have an AD in place first, and the reason for that is not that there's not other decision makers on the plains there, but when you bring an AD in, he then becomes responsible for the problem. It's really an insurance for the people who are really going to make the decisions there at Auburn. But if you look at two guys whose seats are starting to get warm, maybe under the radar, look at Jeff Hafley there at Boston College, not having a good season, probably not going to get much better, and they've kind of regressed. This is his third season. They've regressed every year. And then going down to the G5 ranks, if you look at Jeff Scott at USF, USF is just not, other than the game where they almost upset Florida there in Tampa, Jeff Scott and USF has not had a real good season, has really made no progress in the 3 years he's been there. I had this conversation last week. If you look at Tony Elliott at Virginia and Jeff Scott at USF, not a lot of success for the former Clemson coordinators once they leave Clemson. So, that just kind of shows that, very similar, in fact, to Saban and how assistants left Alabama, maybe didn't do so well. McElwain, Mullen, those kind of guys. So same thing seems to be happening at Clemson, which kind of puts stock in Dabo Swinney a little bit. But when you're looking, I think it starts with Harrison. There at Auburn, that's a mess all the way around. But he's the first name in the conversation. Then Jeff Hafley at Boston College, and then for the group of 5 ranks, Jeff Scott probably will not make it out of this season. So there's 3 names for you, Wes.
Appreciate that. Christian, I'm coming to you next. Mike, give me your thoughts. It's a program that not a lot of people follow. I follow them very close. For the Memphis fan base, Ryan Silverfield's seat is like in fuego on fire right now. But let me get someone from the outsider's perspective. To the rest of the nation, say, what is Ryan Silverfield's seat, would you say at this moment?
Well, I think Silverfield benefits from getting kind of lost in the mix. With everybody's kind of talking about all the coaching changes or the coaching firings that have occurred early in the season. Everybody who watches the coaching carousel is really focused on Auburn right now, and when is the axe going to draw up on Harrison? So I think Silverfield kind of gets lost in the sauce a little bit. I know for the decision makers and the fans in Memphis. They're paying attention to it, but I think nationally it's a little bit under the radar because of that. Memphis is kind of in that transition where they're trying to get to that Boise State, Appalachian State level to where they're a G5 UCF level, where they're a G5 that kind of competes with the big boys. They kind of got the raw end of the deal with the Big 12 expansion last year. So I think Memphis is kind of caught in a tough spot nationally. Being in the Southeast footprint, they're kind of eclipsed by the SEC as well. So that plays into the Harrison thing or the Harsin thing. But I think Silverfield from the national media perspective maybe gets overlooked a little bit, which is unfortunate for the Memphis fans who want him gone because that's less pressure for the administration to move him out. So I think that's kind of where it's at nationally. Probably not bubbling up to the top of the national level conversation like Harsin is, and potentially Hafley there at Boston College, simply because he's a Power 5 coach in the ACC.
Christian, what about you, man? What's some names that seem to get a little hot?
Well, the ones that are obviously generating the most buzz, obviously Brian Harsin, and I don't know if that's totally fair. I mean, Auburn, no, they haven't played well this year, but it's a second year. I know the expectations are high at Auburn, and that's probably the biggest threat to him right now is just the expectations you have at Auburn. You don't have a lot of time to build a program. They kind of expect you to just come in and pretty much win right away, and that's not what Harsin's done so far. And I'm not really, as an Arkansas fan, not an Auburn fan necessarily. If I was in their position, if I was an Auburn fan, their position, I'd probably want him gone too. But as an outsider looking in, I don't know that it's totally fair that he gets fired, which could happen as quickly as this Saturday if they were to lose to Arkansas, which I'm sure they expect to beat Arkansas every year. So if Arkansas is able to beat them, it's a big game for Auburn. It's a big game for Arkansas. And then Texas A&M, obviously they paid Jimbo Fisher all that money, but things are not good there either. I mean, they've got players, getting caught doing stuff on the bus, smoking marijuana is what I heard, or that may have been in the locker room.
Poking it in the locker room.
Yeah, they've got players transferring to left and right, and it's not looking good there. I think Jimbo Fisher gets another year. I think if he gets to 6-7 wins, which I don't even know if they get to that this year, but if they get to 6 or 7 wins, I think he buys another year. But man, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say his seat's hot because of that reason, but I think it's getting warm for sure.
Man, what a great segue into our next point, Christian. Speaking of Texas A&M, I want to talk a little bit about A&M and Auburn and what's going on there. Mike, what are your thoughts on what is happening right now in College Station? Players acting for Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre video back in the day in the room, in there rolling up that good and firing it up in the locker room. Players leaving left and right, and then Jimbo Fisher is the fastest talker in any media press conference ever.
Yeah, I think Texas A&M has worked themselves into a corner with that crazy contract with Jimbo Fisher. I mean, he's not going anywhere anytime soon unless the donors pony up like $75 million. It's just not going to happen. But it's just they're on the verge of an absolute collapse, a program collapse. I hate to use the term dumpster fire, but there's trash in that metal box there, and there is a lit match. It's just a matter of if that match gets thrown in there. guys, just like Christian said, some disciplinary issues, poor performance on the field. I don't understand. Here's what I really don't understand about Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher keeps talking about we're young. He's been there for 3-4 years now. There's no excuse to be young. It doesn't matter. When Saban and Miles were at LSU, they lost entire defenses, right? With Saban and Alabama, they lose entire 11-man starting lineups in the draft every year, and they just replenish because they recruit so well. For Fisher, he doesn't have an excuse. They've had this hype in the offseason. They've had these high recruiting classes for 3-4 years now. That there is no we're young. That's not. Harsin could say that. Josh Heupel could say that, but they're not saying it. But Jimbo Fisher is. And I think, to be honest with you, I think the Texas A&M thing is two-sided. One, the gig is up on Jimbo Fisher. He's an 8-4 coach. He's an 8-4 coach unless he lucks into having a quarterback like Jameis Winston. Other than that, he's an 8-4 coach that's getting paid like a 12-1 coach. That's what it is. And then for A&M, I think they're really disappointed. A little bit of egg on their face. They got rid of Kevin Sumlin, paid him an enormous buyout, and now at the same mark, he has a better record than Jimbo Fisher. So I think the A&M crowds kind of look at themselves in the mirror and saying, "What have we got ourselves into?" And I think the gig is up on Jimbo Fisher. He's an 8-4 coach getting paid like a 12-1 coach. I think that's where it's at. And I'm telling you, there's a big metal box. There's a lot of trash in it, and there's a lit match, and it's this close to being a dumpster fire. They are on the precipice of a program collapse.
I agree. Christian, what are your thoughts on Texas A&M? What's going on down there?
Yeah, man, he summed it up. Mike summed it up well. I mean, Texas A&M's terrible right now, and they could very well get the snot beat out of them against Ole Miss this weekend, and that's just going to pour more gasoline on the fire. And he made a good point about him being there 3 or 4 years. I mean, yeah, he's had plenty of time to get his guys in there, to get a good recruiting class in there. And obviously they got that this year, but things have not gone according to plan. It's crazy how you can be a coach at an institution like Texas A&M and get all that talent and underperform this badly. I mean, 8-4 is probably what the best he's going to get, like Mike said. And, I don't even know if they get to that this year, honestly. And I think Jimbo is getting exposed a little bit. I mean, I think the fact that he won that national championship at Florida State kind of gave him some leverage in getting this job. But also, I think he's also seeing it just, it's hard to win in the SEC. It takes more than just getting talented players. You obviously got to coach them up. And it seems like he's losing the locker room, but I could be wrong about that. That's what it sounds like to me.
It does. Mike, do you have anything else on A&M?
Yeah, it's really a shame at Texas A&M because it's such a great fan base, a great rich tradition and history. I've been to a lot of college football games, probably the best away environment as far as wholesome that I've ever been to in college football. Great fan base, and it's really kind of I kind of hate to see the fact they've sunk so much time and money into Fisher, and they're just kind of stuck with him, and it's at this point. It's really kind of a shame for such a really strong fan base with a lot of tradition, a lot of pomp and circumstance. There are great facilities, great stadium, and a lot of great fans. So it's to the point where you almost kind of feel bad for the fan base because they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, as an Arkansas guy, I don't necessarily feel bad for Texas A&M, the university. I just understand the frustration of having a coach that you want gone and having to endure like constant underachieving, underperforming. It's just not a good look right now for Texas A&M, and I don't know what it'll take to get them out of it, honestly.
It's going to take $75 million. That's what it's going to take.
You're right, exactly.
Speaking of something that's going to take a lot, the Plains in Auburn, Alabama is not to be for one Mr. Brian Harsin right now. I mean, we've heard names from Deion Sanders to, I've heard some coordinators thrown on numerous guys. I mean, let's just get down to the meat of the matter here. How much longer does Harsin last? And then, Christian, can you give me a couple of names that you think are realistic hires? But at the end of the day, with the administration, does it matter who they hire? Are they going to be successful based on what the administration puts on them?
I think the belief, at least among Auburn fans and a lot of the country, really is, Auburn's a good program. There, you should be able to win there. I mean, if you can coach any, you should be able to win there. I just think, there's a certain expectation at Auburn, as I mentioned, and it's just not being met. I mean, I don't think necessarily they're expecting to win a national championship every year, which they might. But, if they're not good enough to beat Alabama, I don't even think they're close to as good enough to beat Alabama this year. But I believe that's as important to Auburn fans as anything, is being able to compete with Alabama every year and have a shot at winning. And I just don't even think, early in the year, there is no confidence in the fan base that they can turn this around. But, this is a big game coming up for them, like I mentioned earlier. If they're able to get this win against Arkansas, they can flip the script, but it doesn't get any easier after Arkansas. It gets a lot tougher. So I really don't know what I don't think actually them winning this game actually does them much good in the long run if they're wanting to get rid of the guy. So now, as far as a possible replacement, I think Auburn's a job where they can hire just about anybody, but the way things are looking, the past two coaches they've had, it's kind of like, what's going on at Auburn? Is the culture changed? What is it? Because, the players, they're always able to get good players in there.
Yeah, they've always got talent, and they're even bringing guys in the transfer portal. I mean, look, Morris Joseph came from Memphis, and he's not playing bad football down there.
I think something that's not talked about either is, a lot of people like to talk down on Bo Nix, but I think if they would have had him this year, they would have probably won a couple more games that they lost. And it's hard to win without a good quarterback. And if you look at their quarterback situation this year,
almost impossible.
Yeah, if you look at their
especially in the SEC. Look around the SEC. Hendon Hooker. Look at what he's doing in that Josh Heupel offense, and we'll get to that later. But if you look around just it doesn't matter who it is. If you don't have your quarterback in place, look at Alabama, look at Arkansas when they didn't have Bryce Young and KJ Jefferson. They weren't the same football team. I mean, and you look around the nation, it's like that. But Mike, when you look at Auburn, are the expectations too high for anyone to succeed?
No, I don't think the expectations at Auburn are too high at all. It's another great program, a lot of tradition. The athletic program is kind of in high gear right now. Bruce Pearl's got the basketball team playing well. The softball team's pretty solid. Of course, they've got a national championship equestrian team. Let's not leave the equestrian team out. At least one Olympian on the gymnastics team. So Auburn's got a great athletic department. Absolutely. The expectations are not too high at Auburn. Remember, this is a school where Bo Jackson went to. So there is no such thing as expectations. Cam Newton. There is no such thing as expectations too high at Auburn. Auburn's got a couple problems. The frustrations that are legitimate with Brian Harsin. You talked about Bo Nix being here this year. Brian Harsin's a quarterback coach. That's how he made his name. That's how he was successful at Boise State. And we've seen no development, no progression of quarterbacks in his time there. Bo Nix didn't get better last year. Robbie Alford's not progressing this year. So that's the legitimate frustration. The illegitimate frustration coming out of Auburn is they are eating their own. Once Alan Green left, that sealed Brian Harsin's fate. He's done at the end of the season. Auburn will bring in they'll hire a new athletic director. They'll bring him in at the end of the year. As soon as they bring the new AD in, they'll let Harsin go. They'll start a search for a new coach. Harsin suffers from the fact that him or Alan Green, either one, were part of the Auburn family. They didn't bring him in from elsewhere. They didn't go find an Auburn guy and bring him in from elsewhere. They got outsiders, and it really upset the power brokers in the Auburn booster base, and they weren't on board from the beginning. They sabotaged Alan Green and Brian Harsin from the beginning. Harsin never had a chance. He really didn't. The critiques on the play on the field are fair, particularly with quarterback development, but that man never stood a shot at Auburn. What they did to him with the character assassination last fall or last winter, it's just inexcusable.
That was nasty.
It was inexcusable.
Do you think they'd like to have Gus Malzahn back right now?
No, or else they wouldn't have paid the money to get rid of him. He's not setting the world on fire at UCF either, even with the quarterback he's got there. So here's what I think they're going to go after. I think they're going to go after Hugh Freeze. I'm not sure Hugh Freeze wants that job. He's happy, I think, at Liberty. I think he would go back to a Power 5 job. I'm not sure he's going to go back to that job. I think you'll probably look at Jamie Chadwell or potentially Todd Monken moving over from Georgia to take that job. I just don't know that you're going to find an established coach that wants to go into that environment. And listen to me, I'm a Tennessee guy. I cover Tennessee, so I know how that goes. Right. I know how it goes when you have a program that's kind of not in a good place. I'll just say that, trying to find an established coach. It's hard to find an established coach when you have an unhealthy program that's not in a good place. You got to go out and you got to get a guy. You have to get a guy like Derek Dooley or Butch Jones or somebody like that, and that generally doesn't work out well. So again, Auburn, that play, it's not in a good place right now, and it's kind of scary. So to answer your original question, no, the expectations aren't too high. They just got to stop sabotaging themselves and make the right hire with both the athletic director and the next head coach.
I think Auburn need to focus on making the right hire and maybe not the sexiest hire. I think about Arkansas and Sam Pittman. I didn't see that coming. Obviously, Sam Pittman's not lighting the world on fire right now, but I think he's established himself as a good fit for Arkansas, and he's got the program still headed in the right direction. I think Auburn needs a guy like that. They need to take their time with this hire. They don't need to rush into another one. I feel like they may have rushed a little bit into the Brian Harsin hire, but
it didn't take long. That's very true. Yeah, it's a good point. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about our guest, and then we're going to get into the week right here on the 4-Star Sports Radio Network.
Hey fans, did you know that 4-Star Sports Media now has a YouTube channel? You can catch exclusive content covering all things Memphis Tigers and the Arkansas Razorbacks. Shows like The Point, and the only show on social media about the Arkansas Razorbacks that is purely fan-driven, Inside the Hog Pen. Plus other shows like The Hog Trough, The 4-Star Sports Show, and many more coming soon. So check them out today. Go on YouTube.com and search 4-Star Sports Media.
Welcome back to the Week Now College Football edition of the 4-Star Roundtable. We've got Mr. Mike Loveall with us tonight from Last Word, and it is now time to learn a little bit more about our guest. So, Mike, talk to us a little bit about what you do and how long you've been doing it.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. I'm the digital media editor at Last Word on College Football, part of the Last Word on Sports Network. Kind of manage the social media there. I also cover Tennessee and Army for them. Great site. Please check us out. LastWordOnSports.com. LastWordOnSports.com/college football. I also cover the service academies on the Yards and Stripes podcast. where I'm the Army football kind of contributor to the Yards and Stripes podcast. Please follow us, part of the Gridiron Football Network. Please follow us there on Twitter at Yards and Stripes. So last word on college football and Yards and Stripes. Please check us out. A lot of writers doing a lot of good work. Got something for every football fan out there.
Yeah,
most definitely. I have to agree. Last Word on Sports has been a great addition to me. I get a chance to write for Arkansas Forum, and it's them, Tony, Maggie, Kate, all those guys over there, Mike as well. Every single person involved in that group or community of people, as I like to call them. It's literally like a big family. Mike, when you look at Tennessee, talk a little bit about your writing history for them and kind of the ebbs and flows, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I've been covering Tennessee for Last Word for 7 or 8 years now. It's been, and of course, I've followed Tennessee football my whole life. So starting in the early '80s, from earliest when I can remember. It's been a long and strange, winding road the last 15 years. I came of age during the Philip Fulmer, late Johnny Majors era, Philip Fulmer era. So I was in college when we won the national championship in '98. And so, it's interesting. It's a pretty good article today, or actually I think I heard it on SEC Network. It was Heath Schuler talking to Chris Chalmers on the SEC Network. Guys like me came of age, guys and gals like me, Tennessee fans, came of age during a period where all we knew for 20 years was winning and success in the SEC. And then, it kind of at the end of the Fulmer era, it kind of broke down. They went outside the Tennessee family, got Lane Kiffin. And ever since then, it's just been kind of this weird place, this weird emotional place. And now that there's an inkling of success back in the program with Josh Heupel, a great offense, putting a lot of points. Danny White, great athletic director. We talked about making the right athletic director hire at Auburn. Tennessee got that right first when we got rid of Fulmer and Pruitt. They went out, they got the athletic director first. They got the right one, and Danny White done a tremendous job at Tennessee. All the sports. I know, Christian, you and Wes talk about Arkansas. Similar to Arkansas, a great bevy of coaches there: baseball, basketball, softball, women's basketball, football. All of those teams have great coaches. They all talk to one another. Very successful program. So they got the right hire at the athletic director. He brings in Josh Heupel. Fireworks in the stadium, new stadium experience this year. It's fantastic. The offense putting in a lot of points, winning games. So Tennessee fans now are kind of like, hey, I remember this. It's kind of like going to your 20th high school reunion or going to a family reunion after you've lived somewhere else for a long time. You remember the faces, you remember the names, but you don't really remember the connective tissue, right? So Tennessee fans are still a little hesitant to completely buy in because there's so much scar tissue from the last 15 years. Bad calls against. I know every team thinks they have bad calls. I'm telling you, any objective person go back over the last 15 years and just find a lot of just bad calls for Tennessee, a lot of bad breaks, just boneheaded decisions, administration, players, coaches. So Tennessee fans, remember the success. We're tasting it again, but we still have that scar tissue front and center in our mind. So it's a really interesting place to be right now. If you're covering Tennessee or if you're a Tennessee fan, it's kind of that. It's a really interesting space for that program and those who follow it and cover it.
Mike, when you talk a little bit about what it's been like as a fan, not as a journalist, writer, but as a fan. What has it been like to deal with the complete fiasco up there? I mean, there's been the McDonald's bags with Jeremy Pruitt. There's just been so many hurdles that university has had to get over. What's it?
Yeah, from a fan perspective, I was actually thinking about this today. From a fan perspective, every college football program has great fans, and there's a lot of emotional attachment to it, whether you grew up in the area or whether you're an alumni. I think, obviously I'm biased. I think the Tennessee fan base is underappreciated nationally as a fan base. Because there's a lot of connective tissue. The state of Tennessee itself is very connected. I know you guys are probably from the Memphis area. For the most part, kind of Middle and East Tennessee particularly are very connected. There's a strong state identity in Tennessee, much like Texas. And so the University of Tennessee has always kind of been the flag bearer for that state identity through a successful sports program, right? So a lot of people in Tennessee who may not be super sports fans still have an identity to the flagship institution of the state. In Tennessee during the 80s and 90s, you really had kind of country music and the University of Tennessee sports. That was the two kind of things that people identified the entire state with. So there's a lot of attachment and pride to the athletic program at Tennessee. And of course it's in the Southeast, the football is king. So the football program kind of carried that. So as fans, it was really disheartening when you it wasn't just that you were a fan of the program, you kind of identified with it, and you knew that your communities identified with it. Tennessee was a school that recruited the state very well for basically its history. And if you had a really good high school football kid in your community, 9 times out of 10 they went to Tennessee if they were good enough. So a lot of communities identified with the program because they sent their kids there, they sent their best football players there, and so there was really a feeling of equity in the athletic program, a feeling of equity in the football team. They make the tee, they wear the tri-stars on the helmet, the whole 9 yards. So it was really hard for Tennessee fans to see just the debacle and just the bad decisions and just all the. It wasn't the losses really. That hurt. That was not. We weren't not something to be proud of, but just the way in which it just collapsed, and it was mishandled by leadership, mishandled by coaches, athletic directors, players. It was just it was just really sad, and it really kind of hurt. It had an emotional impact on people. So it's great to kind of hopefully for the fans, the fans are kind of hopefully getting back to where they think it should be, and maybe seeing a little bit of daylight in a 15-year period that was, man, it was just really hard to watch something that you identify the state with and you identify your communities with go through such turmoil that was really probably unnecessary or avoidable or at least mitigatable. So I think Tennessee fans are relieved and happy that they're kind of in a good place. We use the term Auburn being in a bad place right now. Tennessee is finally in a good place again, and fans are really excited about it.
I think it's kind of ironic. It's like
most definitely.
The state of Tennessee as a whole is feeling sky high right now, but you do have another university in the state that's probably feeling quite opposite right now. They got a coach that they're kind of losing their faith in, I think. And, Memphis, Tennessee is seeing all this success, and Memphis fans are wanting to see that success and that next step up. So it'd be interesting to see. And I think, Tennessee as a whole, when they're good, I think it benefits not only the SEC, but Tennessee is somewhat of a brand in college football. I know the last 15, 20 years, maybe that brand has kind of died down a little bit, but, Tennessee has a lot that they can give to college football. And when they're good, it makes, it provides more entertainment to the SEC, better competition. And I think Heupel's got them to the point where at least it seems like this year that Tennessee is back. At least I would say they're back, because, to go 7-0, it's hard to go 7-0 in any season. And they not only beat Alabama, a team that they haven't beaten in 16 years. Yes, the win was important, but it's the fact that they were able to overcome some plays in that game. And not only, they made the right plays, they made the winning plays. And I think, and they did it against Alabama too. It's interesting to see how they've turned it around there. And I'm not necessarily a Tennessee fan by any means, but I can't say that if Arkansas wasn't in that position, I would feel just as ecstatic as they are right now.
Oh God, yes. You bring up Memphis, and I'll say then we're going to jump over to the games. I had a Memphis fan who has been a person who is a Memphis fan, who's been a Memphis fan for a very long time, tell me straight up, Wes, there's part of the reason that the Memphis fan base is so pissed off is because Silverfield's losing. And you look up in the north part of the state,
Yeah.
And Josh Heupel's kicking everybody's ass.
Yeah, that just rubs it in.
He said it bothers Memphis. It does. And I mean, Memphis fan, I get it. I've matured out of the pure hatred for Tennessee. I like, you would say. I respect Josh Heupel, the job he's done. It's his second year. It's been 4 years now. It's the second year. And I mean, we're going to get to it in a minute, but that puts a defense in an absolute conundrum every single play. Every play. It's there. But like
Tennessee can improve
background
defense.
into you.
I was just going to say, that's the biggest.
We appreciate you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, there's a delay. I just said the biggest question mark right now for Tennessee, and I think they have a good enough offense to go all the way this year, but we all know it's hard to do. It's hard to win. We saw LSU do it in 2019. They didn't have a great defense. Tennessee's defense isn't great right now, but the fact that they're finding a way to win games is very important. If they could just improve that defense a little bit, I think they could have a magical year. But, you know, like I said, it's hard to outscore people every game. They may not necessarily win the SEC, but if they were to somehow squeeze into the playoff this year, I guess this week against Kentucky will tell us a lot about Tennessee, simply because we know Kentucky is going to be gunning for Tennessee. I'm sure it's going to be somewhat of a trap game for the Volunteers, and then they got Georgia next week. So we'll know a lot more about Tennessee. If you didn't already know enough about them now, you'll find out a lot about them in the next 2 weeks.
No doubt. Let's jump into some games real quick. First one is what I think one of the better games of the day. Ohio State and Penn State. And if you're Ohio State and you go back and watch the film that Michigan did against Penn State, you got to feel pretty confident going into this game, I would assume, right?
Yeah, I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you're confident going into the game. I think the line's about 15. I think Ohio State's defense might be a little underrated. A lot of people aren't talking about that. Most of the attention is on C.J. Stroud, the running backs, and the receivers. I don't think this game's going to be particularly close. I think Ohio State might be the best team in the country. They don't have the best resume, but if you look at the film, I think they might be the best team in the country. I certainly think it's between Ohio State, Georgia, and quite frankly, Tennessee at this point. But I don't particularly think this game's going to be too close. I look for Ohio State to kind of run away against Penn State. I think this is a chance for Ohio State to finally make a real statement against a nationally recognized and ranked team, kind of get a little bit of the haters off their back with the weak schedule conversation. And again, they don't have the best resume. That's very true. But if you watch the team play, it's a really good team, potentially the best in the country.
Yeah, I agree. I think
that's what they call the old eye test.
Yeah, I think Ohio State is very good. And you got Penn State last week did not look good against Michigan. But something about this game tells me it's going to be closer than most people think, simply because weird things seem to happen when these two teams meet, especially when they play in Happy Valley. Penn State, that home crowd, I mean, they always get up for Ohio State, but I'm not sure that they've got enough talent this year. I know they've only lost one game, so obviously anything can happen, but I just don't know that they have the firepower this year to keep up with Ohio State. That home field advantage will be important. It'll be critical for them if they want to have a chance in this game at all. But like Mike said, this is a big statement opportunity for Ohio State.
Yeah, and I mean, Sean Grandpa Clifford is going to have to play really well at quarterback. Yeah. I swear that guy has been at Penn State for like
5 or 6 years. 5 or 6 years at least.
No, he's like a COVID senior. Like, it's crazy. I'm telling you, he's been there forever. Zach is in the room. Zach, what about you, man? Ohio State or Penn State?
Well, guys, I just want to say thank you for having me back. It's good to be back in the studio, being good to be back. And I tell you, this is a matchup to watch for. Ohio State's gunning for that. I'm going to say Ohio State's gunning for one of the top 4 spots. Although I don't think I'm hoping for an all SEC top 4, but that's just wishful thinking. But me personally, you gotta go with Ohio State. I mean, just look at the offensive weapons that they've got. Ryan Day's got this team primed and ready to go, and give me Ohio State by 14 plus.
Yeah, give me Ohio State. I agree with Mike. I think they're the best team in the country. I don't care who they play. Watch them play on the field. CJ Stroud, I think, is probably the best player in the nation right now. He's definitely leader for Heisman, in my opinion. And it's close between him and Hooker. It's very close. But give me Ohio State. Up next, we've got a game that I know Christian and Zach are really excited for, and I am too as well. But Arkansas and Auburn. Arkansas travels back down to the Plains, a place that they are to take on a team that hadn't beat in 6 straight attempts. Auburn overall series 19-11-1. Interesting matchup here, Mike. Who you got in this one?
I like Arkansas in this. I like Arkansas in this game. If you look at matching up strength versus strength and weakness versus weakness, the good news for Arkansas is that their weakness is the defensive secondary. Auburn hasn't showed an ability to attack through the air quite yet. They had a little bit of passing success against LSU, but they haven't been able to consistently move the ball through the air. That's kind of Arkansas's weakness is the defensive secondary. So I think Auburn's inability to throw it through the air probably mitigates Arkansas's weakness. I like KJ Jefferson. I think him being back, hopefully he can get back into stride, get a little bit healthier every week. I like him to handle him and the running game to handle Auburn's defense. I like Arkansas. I believe the spread here is 3.5-ish. I would look for Arkansas to cover that. Maybe not easily, but not kind of handle that handsomely.
Yeah, I think last I saw him, that Saracen was 4.5. It opened at 6.5 at the beginning of the week. But I take Arkansas too. I think their running game between KJ Rocket and the plethora of running backs they have up there on the hill or up here on the hill in Fayetteville, I think Arkansas runs right past them and gets a big win against a team. Honestly, that monkey's on the Arkansas back for quite some time. It's irritating to fans. I know. Zach, what about you, man? Arkansas or Auburn? And Christian, I'm coming to you. You there, Zach? All right, Christian, what about you, man? Arkansas or Auburn?
Yeah, this is an interesting game. Auburn, they're not very good at stopping the run, and I think that's the key to Arkansas's success in this game. Arkansas opened up the passing game a little bit a couple weeks ago. I don't expect the same success through the air, but I think being able to run the ball effectively will open up the pass. I think on the other side, Arkansas, they have to stop the run too. They got Tank Bixby on the other side who can really run the football. I know passing, they're not lighting the world on fire passing, but Arkansas secondary is suspect to say the least. And sometimes Arkansas defenses, at least in years past, have made quarterbacks that aren't very good look like Heisman Trophy winners. So I'm not totally confident in this game. It's at Auburn. Weird things happen at Auburn. We saw what happened 2 years ago. And you made a good point, Wes. Arkansas players, coaches, fans, they want to win this game. I mean, this is a big time game for them. They know that they have been embarrassed by Auburn recently, so they want to win this game. I think Arkansas, obviously, running the football, they have to run the football, not turn the ball over. I think all of those things are very important in this game. But also on the other side of that, I don't know that Brian Harsin's completely lost his team yet. I know there's some signs of that, but I expect Auburn to come out Saturday and play Arkansas tough and give them a good game. I just think ultimately Arkansas will be able to pull it out in the end. But I just expect a good game. I don't expect a clean game by either side. I think Auburn, with both teams having 2 weeks to prepare for each other, I think we'll see some maybe some trick plays, onside kicks by Auburn, especially. Like I said, this game is very important for both teams. It's equally as important for Arkansas as it is Auburn.
I agree completely. Zach, about you, man? Arkansas or Auburn?
Y'all got me?
Arkansas.
Am I back?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. So as many of you that follow ITHP, I have a deep-seated hatred for the Auburn Tigers.
Yep.
More for the fact that
Mark
y'all still
Curls.
got me? Yeah. Screw you, Mark Curls.
Mark
Anyway,
Curls, we know. Screw you, Mark Curls, we know.
Hey, don't take my thunder from me. Guys, this is a make or break game for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
It is.
This could be the turning point for the stretch run like we had last year.
It's going to be a tough one.
3 consecutive losses, and then we went on that run and ended up 8-9-3 with a bowl win. But with all the things going on in Auburn right now, I mean, they just don't have the pieces to match up with Arkansas. And I think this is the year, as long as Mark Curls isn't the official, I think this is the year that Arkansas gets over the hump. And I like Arkansas on the plains in Jordan Hare, and give me Arkansas big.
Yeah, at least 17.
Okay.
10-17.
Okay. All right. Up next, we got a big game in the Big 12 between Oklahoma State and Kansas State. Man, this is going to be a battle. 2 football teams, really good. Love this bond. Back Kansas State, one of my favorite players in college football. But man, it's hard. The mullet is Oklahoma State Cowboys are playing small, man. The mullet, he's a man. He's 45, I think now. He's 40 anymore, I think. But Oklahoma State, Kansas, 69th beating brawl. Oklahoma State leads the overall 42-26, and they've won 3 straight. State. So, with that being said, I'm going to start off with Oklahoma State. I don't want to say big, but I'm going to take Oklahoma State. I'm also going to toot my own horn. I hope I don't jinx myself, but I picked Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 in preseason, and people call yeah, looking pretty good. Who you got, Christian?
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup for sure. Kansas State and Oklahoma State. Kansas State kind of have salvaged. Hey, they salvaged that what we thought was a bad loss at the beginning of the season to Tulane, and it turns out Tulane might be a pretty good football team. Kansas State has righted the ship.
You keep digging tonight, don't you? You keep digging in Memphis, don't you? Go ahead.
No, I'm just. Hey, Memphis almost. They made a valiant effort to come back and make.
Go ahead. Don't be trying to butter shit up. Go.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Kansas State. I think the fact that it's at Kansas State, the way they're playing right now, I think when I think of Oklahoma State, I think of they score a lot of points. I think more of Kansas State as a team that they're, more of a defensive team. I think it's kind of a clashing of 2 styles, so to speak. I think Kansas State will have to keep this game. I say low scoring. There's not many low scoring games in the Big 12 anymore, but they can't get into a shootout with Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State usually comes out on top in those type of games. I like Kansas State at home. I think they're just playing good football right now. That may not be the popular pick, but that's what I'm going with. Oklahoma State did get a big win over Texas last week, so they're feeling high right now. Both teams are feeling good right now, but I think Kansas State gets it done.
They're definitely not as high as Texas. Mike, what about you, man? Oklahoma State or Kansas State?
I think this is one of the interesting games of the week. The really interesting line. Last time I saw Kansas State 1.5 point favorite. against Oklahoma State. I know you and I, in our group talked about last week. Oklahoma State was a dog again at home to Texas, and they end up winning that game. I understand why the line is what it is. If you look inside Oklahoma State's numbers, they're not quite as impressive as the aggregate would make it seem. If you look at their average per rush, average per attempt, if you look at the advanced metrics, Oklahoma State isn't as dominant as maybe a 5-1 record would suggest. You look on the other side, you got Chris Kleiman has instituted that kind of methodical, workman-like, continuing drives at Kansas State. Kind of impressive. He's got the best. We talked earlier about people not getting the best out of players, particularly at Auburn. He's getting the best out of Adrian Martinez. That guy's been around for, I think, 8 years, 10 years, 20 years now. And this is by far the best season he's had. That's due to coaching. When you're at Auburn and you see them complaining about the development, this is what they want. They want a coach like Kleiman who can develop players, get the best out of them. I think this is going to be a great matchup. I still like Oklahoma State in this one. Even though it's on the road, no offense to any Kansas State fans, Manhattan's not the most hostile environment in college football. I still think Spencer Sanders, his athleticism, the athleticism around him, and Derek Mason's defense, which Derek Mason's defense at Ohio State, it's a lot like Tennessee's. It's not a bad defense, no matter what the numbers say. The fact that they go so fast and the fact that they the offense allows the other team to play as many plays as they play is one of the reasons why they give up the yards and the points they do. It's still an okay defense. So I kind of like Oklahoma State in this one. If I were forced to put money, this is one I would stay away from. But if you're asking me who I think is going to win, I would say probably Oklahoma State. I think they're just more athletic and more explosive. Although I do like what Kleiman's done at Kansas State. I think it's going to be a really close game. I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think Oklahoma State's athleticism finds a way to win to the end.
Yeah, and K-State let one slip away last week.
Yeah, they did. I tell you, Chris Kleiman really impressed me at the Big 12 media days. Listening to how he talked about his team, how they were talking about him. Adrian Martinez was there, and you could just see the kid glowing because he was excited to play football for a coach like Chris Kleiman. It's a great point, Mike, you bring up.
Yeah, we talked about identity and coaches earlier with the coaches on the hot seat. That's an athletic director who made a perfect hire for a school. Chris Kleiman, his personality, his concepts, his philosophies fits absolutely perfect at a school like Kansas State. It's not flashy like Oregon. You're not going to bring a guy in who wants to do 37 different combinations of uniforms. It's not kind of you're not going to bring in a guy like Lane Kiffin or Shane Beamer who wants to put the videos together, because that's not the players you're going to get at Kansas State. So we talked a lot about coaches earlier. That's an example of an athletic director in a program who brought the right guy in that has a matching identity to the program, and it works because they got the right guy.
Great point. Zach, what about you, man? Oklahoma State.
Give me Oklahoma State, 24-21 over K-State.
All right, a lot of thought in that one. All right, up next, we got a game I know Mike is excited about. Kentucky. Oh, my bad, Christian. I just saw your message. My fault, man.
Yeah.
Kentucky and Tennessee.
One thing.
Go ahead and make your point quick, Christian.
About Kansas State last week, I was looking at, they were up 28 to 17. Yeah, 28 to 17 at half. Didn't score a point in the entire second half. It's just a tale of two halves last week against a good TCU team. I don't know exactly how that will affect them this week. I'm sure they're going to want to kind of make up for that bad performance last week in the second half in a game that they really had control of at halftime.
It's a good point. Up next, we've got another big game in the SEC, and it resonates in Knoxville, Tennessee. Once again, I think Tennessee is making some money because there's folks traveling to go to some games right now. That is for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all that. That's like when that team was terrible. I would say terrible. When it wasn't good, that place was still packed. I mean, it's kind of like Nebraska. As bad Nebraska got, they were still selling games out. Okay, my bad, Mike. Okay, I would say it's kind of like I saw expect. All right, Mike, I'll let you start off on this one, man. This is for Kentucky and Tennessee. Can Kentucky get it done in Knoxville?
Kentucky's a good team. Mark Stoops is a really good coach. To do what he's done at Kentucky is very impressive. Great coach, great program. Here's what I worry about Kentucky. They're coming off the bye week. They're as healthy as they've been, but that whole starting lineup hasn't really played together since about the first game. Their offensive line's been a little bit disappointment. They haven't been able to get the running game going until last game 2 weeks ago. They're coming off a bye against Mississippi State. Chris Rodriguez had, I believe, 190 yards. I think the Wildcats had 220, 230 total off the top of my head. So the offensive line's been a little bit disappointed this season. The defensive secondary has been a little bit disappointed this season. If you were looking for the two units you need to step up against Tennessee, those would be the two units. Your defensive secondary has to be able to play man coverage, at least two of the three receivers, because as you said earlier, the Heupel offense uses all 53 1/3 yards of the field. So you're putting that, if you play one high safety like LSU did, you're putting that safety in a real hard bind. So you're going to have man on man, at least two. It's basically pick your poison. And they just destroyed LSU's safety on that. And then Tennessee's defense, like I said, their weak spots, the secondary, they've actually been pretty good against the run. I think you'll see Kentucky use a lot of the running backs out of the backfield. You'll see them use their tight end. They really want to put the Tennessee linebackers in a position where they can't be aggressive and they can't blitz. They have to worry about the tight ends across the middle and the running backs on the outside. I think they're going to try to use that to loosen up the run game. For them to win, Chris Rodriguez has to have about 200 yards. Will Levis has to stay healthy, and Will Levis has to hit a couple shots down the field. Don't forget, this was a 45-42 game last year in Lexington. But Tennessee's a lot better this year. Kentucky's probably regressed a little bit. A lot of that's due to injury. I like Tennessee in this game. I think the current line is maybe 12.5, 13, something like that. I think it'll be about that. I don't think it's going to be super close, but Kentucky's a good team. If Tennessee maybe fumbles, has a special teams mishap, fumbles a punt, Hendon Hooker maybe throws a pick six, you could see this game be tight at the end. But I think Tennessee's focused. They have not come out unfocused in a single game under Heupel. They understand the stakes. They're not looking forward. Cedric Tillman's coming back. I think Jalen McCullough is going to play. I think you'll see, Tennessee's probably as healthy as they're going to be all season as well. I like Tennessee in this game. As long as they execute and it's a clean game, I probably 10, 14, 17 points, I think. That's where I'm at right now.
Okay. Well, Christian, this is the UT leads this series 82-26-9, and they've won 3 out of the last 5 games against Kentucky. When you look at Tennessee, Mike just talked about it. I talked about it last week. When you look at this offense, they spread you all the way out, literally sideline to sideline, and then you have a conundrum every play. Do I guard the screen route over here, or do I guard the guy that's going to the end zone on every play? If you look at them, it's really kind of a mesh system that they run. It's a beautiful system that Heupel has, and then they run it so fast. I'll go back and look. I ran the numbers. Mike, you may correct me on this. I believe they snapped ball 12.
Yeah, they like to snap it before the play clock gets to 15. Here's the other thing. Christian, I just want to add one thing. Tennessee averages more run plays per game than they average pass plays per game. That's why if you look at, you were talking about Heisman earlier, if you look at the numbers, Hendon Hooker's numbers are a little bit behind CJ Stroud's, but if you look at average, it's off the charts, because Tennessee is actually, most people don't realize this, it's actually a run first team. They actually run more running plays per game than they do passing plays. All the highlights are the passes, but they run. They're a run first team. They average more running plays than passing plays per game. Just, I wanted to add that to the conversation.
Oh, no problem. Go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about Tennessee's offense. They call it a gimmick offense. I've heard a lot of people refer to it as a gimmick offense. But here's my point. Does it really matter if they're putting up points? I mean, what they're doing is working. The only problem with that offense, which really hasn't shown itself, yet is you go so fast, your defense doesn't get a lot of time to rest. Obviously, against Alabama, they were able to overcome that. I think Kentucky actually has a pretty decent defense. I don't see them being able to slow down Tennessee enough in this game. As Mike said, Kentucky's got to slow. They've got to slow this game down. They've got to chew clock. They've got to keep it out of Tennessee's hands, or they're not going to win a shootout with Tennessee. They don't have the athletes to get into a shootout with Tennessee. So I just don't see any way Kentucky wins this game. I know they're healthier. I know Will Levis is back, which is huge. I think Kentucky will be able to score on Tennessee quite a bit, but I just think Tennessee's offense. I mean, Alabama couldn't stop it. I know Alabama's defense isn't as good as it typically is, but it's still a good defense, despite what people say. Kentucky, that's their only hope, is to force a couple turnovers, which Hendon Hooker really hasn't done that much this year. He's, like you said, Wes, playing like a Heisman candidate right now. I think Tennessee better not overlook Kentucky, because they obviously will have a huge game next week. If Georgia's able to beat Florida, which I think they will, and if Tennessee's able to beat Kentucky, which they should, we're looking at maybe the biggest game in the SEC in, I don't know, 10 years at least.
Since LSU Alabama 2019, I think. So I'd say 3 years. That Joe Burrow Tua game was probably right there with that.
Yeah, I agree. When you look at Tennessee, of course, full disclosure, I'm a Memphis fan. It's obvious. Big 901 behind me. Like I said earlier in the show, it's impressive what they've done, from the athletic director hire to the Heupel hire to basketball hire and Rick Barnes. Sorry. If you just go down the line and you look very similar to Arkansas, like Mike talked about earlier, they're making the right hires. Kentucky, that is nothing more than a athletic director and a fan base being patient with a football coach and allowing him to build what he wants to build. And
you can get by with that at Kentucky.
He's done a hell of a job. I mean, Kentucky's won 10 games 4 times in school history, and I think he's done it 2 or 3 times. I mean, it's impressive what he's done there.
I think
he's the same team. Will Levis.
He's the winningest coach in that program history, and that the coach he passed was Bear Bryant. Anything you do better than Bear Bryant, I mean that's an accomplishment. Florida State offered him that job, and he said no. I'm staying at Kentucky. When I was growing up, that would not have happened. I'll just be quite frank with you. Going back to the game real quick, last year I talked about last year, Christian, to your point, Kentucky had a 47-13 time of possession advantage over Tennessee. Kentucky had the ball 47 minutes.
And they still lost.
Out of the 60 minutes of the game, Tennessee had the ball 13 minutes and still beat them 45-42. Tennessee's got a lot more depth. They played, I think, 26 guys on defense last week. I think they probably got close to 20 against Alabama. So the big difference this year for Tennessee's defense, they have a lot more depth. So you talked about Kentucky trying to string together drives to wear Tennessee's defense down. That will certainly help Kentucky, but Tennessee does have a lot more depth, particularly at the defensive front 7, the linemen and the linebackers. So that I think Tennessee's in a little bit better place. But you're absolutely right, Wes, about Mark Stoops. Great coach, done a lot of great things at Kentucky, and should be recognized for that.
Most definitely. Up next, we've got a big game out in the ACC. Pitt Panthers traveling to Chapel Hill to take on the North Carolina Tar Heels. There's a lot of stories out there in college football, but the fact that Mack Brown is back at North Carolina and North Carolina is successful again, it just makes me happy. Like, I love Mack Brown. I've always liked him as a football coach, loved him as a color commentator and analyst as well. When you look at Pitt, I don't think that it's going quite like they want it to out there, Pitt. Would you agree, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. Pitt, the defending ACC champions, coming back. A lot of high hopes. I think they returned all 5 of their starting offensive linemen. They've got a great running back, and they've got Clayton Slovis there at quarterback, and it just hasn't it hasn't worked for them. They barely survived West Virginia. Tennessee went in there on the road, won in overtime, and that was kind of a C game for Tennessee, and they still beat the defending ACC champions. Not really sure what the issue is at Pitt. It's a lot of talent there, but I'll tell you, when you talk about head coaches, Pat Narduzzi is one of those guys that just kind of has a reputation for, when things are going well, you like him, but when things turn south, he's not a guy that kind of endears a fan base or endears players, which is fine. You don't really need endearment when you're a coach, but that's kind of the knock on that program, is that if you're winning, he's a guy you're okay with, but when you start to not win, he's not a guy that's going to rally the troops, as it were. Kind of a similar reputation as Dave Doran at NC State. So we'll see where that goes with Pitt. A lot of talent there. Not really sure why they're not putting it together. The offensive line did really well last year. They kind of bulldozed through that division, and they just I watched that Tennessee game. Obviously, they were second, and they've given up a couple bad losses this year, and kind of inexplicable. They lost to Georgia Tech. I mean, that was embarrassing. That was at home, I believe. They lost big to Louisville in Louisville. Scott Satterfield, very kind of a schizophrenic Louisville team. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good. You never know what you're going to get with Louisville. So I just don't know what's going on at Pitt. And when you can't see what's going on with talent on the film, that usually indicates something in the locker room, something in the program. So we'll see where Pitt goes from here. I like North Carolina. Drake May, I believe, is 22 touchdowns, 4 interceptions maybe. I think he's plus 18, putting up a lot of points there at North Carolina. I think they're in North Carolina. I like North Carolina in this game. Until Pitt can show me they've got something figured out, I'll take whoever they're playing with the points. Just really kind of disheartening what's going on in Pitt.
Completely agree. Drake May's doing an incredible job. He's on everybody's Heisman list that I know that's putting one out as well. Christian, what about you, man? I would take North Carolina in this game big as well. Christian, what about you?
Yeah, I'll go with North Carolina. They can really score points, and they've shown that this year. Pitt, obviously, not what we thought they would be this year, defending ACC champions, so we knew there'd probably be a little drop-off, but hasn't gone well for them. I think they dropped a game to Georgia Tech this year, if I'm mistaken, and that wasn't a good look for them. It's kind of – I remember watching them in the first game of the year against West Virginia, I believe. I think it was their first game of the year. Their receivers is what stood out to me. They were just dropping everything. They're going to have to make every catch against North Carolina. North Carolina doesn't have a great defense, but they're going to have to put up some points. I know I've said that quite a bit with some of these games, but, North Carolina's a high-powered offense, and their defense obviously isn't the greatest because of how many points they put up and how quickly they score. But, I just don't see any way North Carolina – they slow down North Carolina. Drake May is playing great, throwing the ball all over the place. Probably will end up, if they keep playing the way they are, they could be in the ACC championship.
Yeah. Speaking of that, little ACC action as well. Wake Forest, the team that I have been very impressed with. That football coach out there, his name slips my mind right now, but Dave Clawson has done an incredible job out there in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where our guy Tony Syracuse is located at now. Well, that's what he covers. He lives in Charlotte, right? Or does he live in Winston?
No, he lives in Charlotte, the outskirts of Charlotte.
Yeah. But they're going to take on a schizophrenic. It was a perfect way to describe Louisville's football season this year.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to take Wake on strictly the fact that we don't know what Louisville team is going to get off the bus, whether that be at their home stadium or wherever they're playing. Sam Hartman right now is lighting it up. This Wake football team is talented, man. They've been fun to watch for the last few years, and it's going to continue. I think that Dave Clawson is building something in there that can stand in the ACC. I know that may be a bold statement to some people, but if you look at his track record and you look at what he's built thus far at Wake Forest, that statement holds true. Mike, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dave Clawson's another. We talked about Chris Kleiman earlier. You know what Dave Clawson focuses on is the fundamentals. When you watch Wake Forest under Clawson's tenure, I can't remember a game where they came out and they were unfocused and they weren't ready to play on the basics, the fundamentals of the game. It's a team that's going to make the right reads. He gets quarterbacks that will go through their progressions, not have bad turnovers. It's not going to be the flashiest team. Sam Hartman's not going to put up C.J. Stroud numbers or even Hendon Hooker numbers, but he's a really quality quarterback. Here's the thing with a Clawson coached Wake Forest team. You know what you're going to get. We talked about Louisville being schizophrenic. With Wake Forest, you know what you're going to get, right? You just know it's the same product every weekend, and that's a huge compliment to a coach. This is a line I don't know that I get. I think Wake is a 4-point favorite. I really like I would take, if I were a betting man, which I am not. I would really like Wake on that. I don't trust Louisville. And like I said, Clawson's Wake Forest team is a team that you know what you're going to get. And when you're looking at road teams who have either dogs or slight favorites, if you have one of those teams that you know what you're going to get, steady as they go, kind of fundamental teams, that's when you want to highlight that. Look, Louisville's got some athletes. Scott Satterfield's kind of an offensive guy that they might put up 70 points. I doubt it, but you know what you're going to get with Wake. I like Wake in this game. I like them by way more than 4 points.
Yeah, this line is 3.5 right now, according to Bet Saracen.
Yeah, you look at Wake last year. They went 10-2, and they're 6-1 right now. They're quietly the 10th best team in the country. Kind of out of nowhere. I mean, obviously we knew they would be good this year. There was some speculation at the beginning of the year. Sam Hartman maybe not even suit up this year, but they're playing some good football right now, and you know what you're going to get out of Wake in the fact that they can score some points. I mean, their only loss this year was to Clemson, and that's a game where really could have went either way. Clemson was able to pull that out at the end, but we could be talking about Wake being undefeated right now, and kind of one of those sleeper teams. I think they're gonna roll Louisville. Just don't see any way Louisville beats them. Like you said, they're kind of a wild card right now. You start sleeping on them, and then they it seems like they might turn it around. Now, if they were able to get this win, that would be big for Louisville, but I just don't see it happening. It helps them that it's at home, obviously, but I think Wake gets this win and gets it pretty handily.
Oh, I completely agree. Well, that's going to be all of our games for this week. We got one more portion of the show, and we like to call it Final Thoughts. Kind of I think, wasn't it Jerry Springer that had like Jerry's Final Thoughts or something like that back in the day? Jerry Springer show by any stretch of imagination. But Christian, we'll start with you, man. What are your final thoughts? And the final thought this week are just things that you're looking forward to in this week in college football.
Well, there's a lot of great games this weekend, obviously. Tennessee, Kentucky, just a lot of good games in the SEC, particularly, and games all around the country, really. I think, I was thinking earlier about when we were talking about coaches on the hot seat. What do you guys think of what's going on in Miami right now?
Oh, I don't think he's going anywhere. It's going to take him time to get that thing cleaned up, I think. That's my opinion.
Yeah. It's not looking great right now, but that obviously could change. I think he's got at least a year or two to turn things around at Miami. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good games this weekend, particularly Ohio State, Penn State. I think that's the biggest game.
Yep.
Just because of, how that matchup has gone in the past. Ohio State obviously can prove themselves this week with a win. And then, you got the cocktail party, Florida, Georgia. I don't think necessarily it shouldn't be a close game, but, crazy things can happen in those rivalry matchups. I talked about Kentucky, Tennessee. You got Michigan State, Michigan. Yeah, I don't think Michigan's going to have any problems there. So
No, I don't think they will.
Yeah, and there's a couple other games even. So a lot of teams on a bye this week as well. So yeah, that's my final thoughts.
My final thought, Mike, I'm coming to you. My final thought is this: I'm glad that Memphis is not going to lose this week because we're on a bye. But the thing is, with a bye week, is you can actually lose during a bye week depending on how you prep. So I'm hoping that Memphis prep. I talked to a player Tuesday night. Sounds like everything's going well. Mr. Mike Loveall, thank you very much for joining us tonight, man, and give us your thoughts to close the show out.
Yeah, I'll give you some final thoughts. It's not about a game. It's about a current conversation in college football, players going to coaches and opting out. I like where college football has went with empowering the players, with scholarships year on, year out, allowing them to transfer, making forward on the NIL. I think college football has found a way to move forward and ensure the game stays where it's at. But we got to be cautious not to swing the pendulum all the way into one side. Look, if these teams, the teammates depend on players. If the decision to redshirt or not is that's the coach's decision. If you don't want to be at a program and you don't want to play on Saturday, then look, college is about making big boy decisions. Leave the program. That's just the bottom line. If you don't want to be there, then that's your choice. That's your right. The NCAA has put mechanisms in place to where you can transfer, and that's fine. But what you can't do is tell the coach, hey, I still want to practice. I still want to get better. I still want to use the weight room. I still want to use the training tables, but I don't want to play on Saturday. That's it. It's not about that. Then it ceases to become about the players' rights and the players' decision and their ability to take care of themselves. Then it becomes detrimental to both their teammates, the program's ability to win games, and it affects the coach's livelihood. So I urge fans, when you have these conversations and you look at these news stories, kind of remember, see these things in the holistic picture. Let's not swing the pendulum too far right and just say guys can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to use the weight room in practice, but I'm not going to go play in a game so I can save a year of eligibility. Some stuff out of Dallas a couple weeks ago, some stuff down at Auburn this week about that. So just keep the whole picture in mind. As we put in place mechanisms to usher college football into the modern era, we just have to strike the right balance. We can't swing the pendulum too far one way or the other way. It's a great game. We all love it. It's going to be another great weekend of college football. I'm looking forward to it. All these games, we're going to try to consume as much as we can. Of course, I'll be watching Tennessee, Kentucky under the lights at night on a Tennessee Saturday night. And but I just those are my final thoughts. Wes, thanks for having me. Christian, great to join you guys for the show. And let's do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Certainly.
We do, man. And Mike, that you bring up a great point there. Just to close the show out, we've got to understand you are giving these players some empowerment or entitlement with these NIL deals and things of that nature. But
they're still kids
starting to learn. They're still 18 to 20-year-old kids, but they're also smart. I'm just going to call it out like I see it. When it comes to Quinn Ewers, he used the NIL deal perfectly in order to get his money and also be able to leave. Correct on that, right? He did get money from Ohio State because they're not performance based. So that means that player is going to get paid no matter what. When you look around the country, you look at Texas A&M last week, like Mike said, Auburn this week. I think this is a problem that we're going to continue to see. And if more coaches like Brian Harden would do the right thing and tell him, no, you get off my team, that I think would start to fix this problem, hopefully, before it gets out of hand. Mike, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I'm all for a guy, kid. We call them kids. That they're adults, they're men. I'm all for these men making their own decisions and being empowered to make their decisions. If they don't think that program's right for them, they should be able to transfer to another program. They should be able to leave that program. What I'm talking about is the nuance and the subtlety. When a kid goes to a coach and says, "Hey, I want a red shirt," and the coach doesn't want to red shirt him, what he's really saying is, I want to continue to use your coaches. I want to continue to use your weight room. I want to continue to use your training table, your dietitians, the athletes lounge, but I don't want to play on Saturdays so I can save my eligibility. We should empower these kids to be able to make their own decisions, but we can't do that at the peril and detriment of all the teammates and the programs. We have to strike the right balance. That's what I'm saying. Look, if a kid wants to transfer and wants to move, I'm all for it. NIL, if that's the way we're going to go, that's fine too. There's boundaries on that too. Can't be performance based, and it has to be based on something they do, whether that's sign autographs or in a commercial. It can't just be a check. Here, come to this school for $20,000. Obviously, that's wrong. My point on the thing that happened at SMU several weeks ago and the thing that happened at Auburn this week is, just because an article says Harsin's a bad guy because he won't let a guy redshirt, you have to understand what goes behind that. Mark Stoops had a great answer to a question on SEC Radio. I think Childer was asking to him yesterday. He really laid it out very nicely. When a guy does that, he's really kind of harming his teammates more so than anything for him. Look, if you don't want to be there, that's fine. No harm, no foul. I'm a Tennessee guy. I watched 30 of them go last year. Eric Gray to Oklahoma, Ty Chandler in North Carolina, a couple quarterbacks here, a couple quarterbacks there, whatever. We lost 30 of them, and that's fine. No big deal. But when you're asking a red shirt, that's too much. If the coach needs you to play on Saturday, you need to go play on Saturday. And if the coach thinks you need a red shirt, that's a coach's decision. That's all I'm saying on that.
It's a great point. Let's wrap it up once again from Mike Loveall, last word on sports, college football, Christian Johnson. As always, go to 4star.live. Check out our great website. You can check out all things 4-Star Sports Media. Until next time, we are out.